Hello, welcome to Just for Farmers one more time. I'm with Paul the Legend Harris, and our guest interview today is with Jules Morgan. Before we say hello to Jules, Paul, how are you doing today?
Absolutely splendid. Thank you. Any better when I'd burst.
Tickety and boo. um, Jules is a fascinating guy. I'm going to let him tell you more about who he is and how he's got to be doing what he's doing today, which is fascinating. But in the spirit of honesty, I've known Jules a very long time, and I call him a friend first and an associate second. We met at a boxing match that was raising money for charity. Neither of us were a fan of boxing, so we went to the bar, became firm friends. I ended up being his best man. That was one of the worst decisions he's ever made. And, and we've become firm friends ever since. I won't say too much other than to say Jules will not probably tell you his CV, so I'm only going to tell you a fraction of it. Serial entrepreneur in the engineering industry, world-renowned marine design engineer, more patents and trademarks next to his name than you can shake a stick at. I think please correct me if I'm wrong, Jules, 12 times world powerboat racing champion, twice world record holder.
Combined, it's six. It's six.
Six.
Yeah.
Okay. I just over-egged the pudding a bit there.
And only six.
Only six. Slacker. And but the reason we're fascinated in having a chat with you today for farmers is because not only have you got some farming background yourself as a child, but also you're quite an expert when it comes to innovation and sustainability. So, Jules, give us a sort of a 3-minute potted history as to how you've got to what you're doing today and what are you doing today.
Oh, you forgot to mention Queen's Ward.
I was going to let you slip that one out.
Yeah. I was brought up in a rural area in East Sussex. It's primarily farming, very little industry there. Completely failed at school. My first job was packing potatoes and helping a dairy farmer friend of mine, or his father, or his family, milk. So I got to see how hard farming was. I jokingly say to people that I packed so many potatoes, I can look at a potato and tell you the weight, tell you the variety, and from the mud, probably tell you where it's been grown. But wow. Well, I can't actually, but
it's a good story.
It's a good story. But the point is that that's where I started off. Yeah, I failed everything at school. I just wasn't interested at school, and then I got an engineering apprenticeship to, believe it or not, manufacture and design rock and soil instruments. So we were developing instruments for measuring the health of soil. Right. Yeah, back in the late 1970s.
Okay.
Yeah. So did projects like the Thames Barrier, de Norwich. But what happened is when I was on the shop floor, I went day and night release to college, and all of a sudden everything suddenly made sense, and I realized that what I was learning or being taught were tools that I could use, just like a micrometer or file or a drill or a hammer. Yeah. And that was it. I'd never looked back. Ended up working for Phillips Research Laboratories. Was sponsored to go to university by Phillips Research Laboratories, and I was dealing in technology that some people haven't even seen yet. The claim to fame for Phillips Research Laboratories was a patent a day for 20 years. Yeah. So I saw the first CD burnt. One of my projects was making linear accelerator tubes for cancer therapy machines more accurate. I then won a scholarship, a National Science Foundation scholarship, to go to Rhode Island and MIT Robotics Research Department. So the one thing that I learned was that robots are very limited, and artificial intelligence, I wouldn't even call it intelligence. Yeah, it's just rules-based decision making. There's no intelligence there. There is no ability to abstract. It's a long way. So what I learned there was a lot of technology, and Phillips Research, a lot of technology and ideas are oversold. Yeah. So what, you know, I would point out, where's my self-driving car? You promised it to me in 2022. Yeah. And things take longer than you realize. And the technology may work, but the environmental conditions may not. Yeah. And I'll go on to explain that in some of the.
Yeah, and I think farmers will be absolutely nodding at that as well.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it's so applicable to farming. You know, I wrote a paper for the COP26 sustainability book, and I talk about political and what I call academic research expediency. Yeah. Sometimes you have a situation that the old ways are the best ways. Yeah. But you won't get research for it because it's not what I call fidget spinners and loom bands, and it's not shiny and it's not new. When in fact, in many instances, when I look at a lot of technology, the question I ask is, can we do it? Yeah. Should we do it? And it's that last question that people don't ask. Should we do it? And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to shoehorn new ideas and new technology based around research funding, which is primarily going to go to the new shiny things, rather than going back and seeing if we can optimize the way that we used to do it. Yeah. And so anyway, I left I left Apple and PRTM, and I set up on my own, and that's when you met me, Dave. And I went from basically a job that people would die for, back onto the shop floor wearing a boiler suit. And the first thing my business did, I started off with, I think it was 800 square feet, and I was cleaning up castings from the local casting industry.
Why did you do that, Jules? What was that? Because that would maybe have been perceived as a backward step. What was the motivation?
The motivation was that I was working for a company, I can't name them, and I was asked to falsify something.
Right.
And it was to do with some of the characters in the Guinness scandal. Do you remember the Guinness scandal?
I do, yeah.
And I just flat point refused. I just said I can't do that. So this information was going off to the city, it was going off to the bank, and I just said no. I'm sorry, I just can't do that. It's just, it's just not right. So I engineered a situation that I got made redundant. Now, considering I had actually written, when I came into the company, my own employment contract, it was a fairly so I had the BMW for 6 months, I had half a year's salary, and sometimes when you set up a business, I say to people that you don't choose when you set up the business chooses you. Yeah. And you know when the time is right. Yeah.
Be true of my own business, that is, Jules.
Exactly. Oh, is it? Yeah.
Well, yeah, exactly the case.
Yeah. And you just go, okay, well, I've got to give it a go. Yeah. As it happens, because my knowledge and expertise was so specific, the consultancy that I used to work for, whilst I was trying to set up and grow my business, they kept on giving me contracts. And so went into Scion, went into Apple again, went into BAE, went into numerous companies, basically on a firefighting basis. So I would be called in, and I'd have to sort things out pretty quickly when things were going wrong. And
what sort of things were you asked to sort out?
One of them was upping the ammunition output for the Second Gulf War.
Oh, wow.
So I did that at 3 sites, and we managed to do that, but I'd never seen anything like it. Underinvestment was just astonishing. Scion, they had a problem with one particular feature on their products breaking, and I think it was they had £250 million worth. This is a good while ago now. £250 million worth of warranty claims. and I had to go in and figure out what on earth was going on. And to be perfectly honest, it all came down to one hole diameter, and that was it. Yeah. And when I asked
More
how are you
details.
measuring this coming, the parts are made by subcontract, how are you measuring it? The head of quality pulled out a paper clip and put the paper clip in the hole, and he said, if that fits in, it's okay.
And
And
by
I
such
said,
margins, fortunes are lost and made. Yeah.
yeah. And I just said, I wouldn't mind so much if it was a calibrated paper clip. I said, what happens? What happens if you lose that paper clip? And he said, well, I've got a
Pick
box of
another one.
1,000 here. I was just like, what? What? And so where you see the story behind that is where you see big problems, they are generally caused by something really simple. Yeah. And we don't stop to think about the obvious simple things, but and I saw this in a lot of tech companies. They loved problems because it gave them something to do. It was it solving problems was in their DNA. Yeah.
Yeah.
But solving problems that holds up production, yeah, you need to get rid of that problem once and for all. And it's a cultural thing that you've got to keep on reinventing rather than basically saying, no, this is optimized, we know this works, yeah, and then moving on from there. And so that was a really big lesson that I brought into my business. So I design and manufacture products, as you know, Dave, that we sell all over the world that just don't go wrong. They just don't go wrong because I've designed out any failure.
And I think it's fair to say, Jules, from what little I understand of your business operations, is that what you've specialized in is not actually going looking for a problem. People have come to you with a problem, and you
Every
look
time.
solving it.
Yeah.
I mean, the waterless pump, for example.
Yeah, well, it's not a waterless pump, otherwise it wouldn't be a pump. But
Sorry, show my ignorance. But
the run dry pump, you mean?
The run dry pump,
yeah. So it doesn't fail if it runs dry. We won a design award for that, an international design award. Well, we won 3 international design awards, and they basically asked me to stop entering, which is a bit annoying because my best innovations were the ones that followed after those, but there you go. I tend to stop at 3. So, world records, I tend to stop. And when I was with the 6, it's year 1 and year 2. So I had 3 records and I broke them. So that's still 6 records. And I tend to stop at 3.
So I can see how this has fostered a desire for innovation and design within you. But let's sort of turn the focus onto our listeners and observers today.
Let's talk about sustainability.
Yeah.
In potentially farming.
So what is your definition of sustainability in today's world?
Right. Okay. I think you have to turn all of these buzzwords on their head. Yeah. And there's a hierarchy. Yeah. So sustainability for what? What are we trying to sustain? That got me interested in why things happened. So sustainability, yeah, it depends which direction you come from. So for me, farming and sustainability in farming, its purpose is to sustain us as human beings. Yeah. And a lot of people seem to neglect that without a person putting a seed in the ground, yeah, there is no civilization. It doesn't exist. There is no ability to sustain the human population. It doesn't exist. So when you take everything right back to base principles, sustainability of food production, yeah, sustains the human population. And without that, you have nothing. You don't have tech. You don't have the arts. You don't have literature, because we have to be able to sustain ourselves, to be able to have the free time to consequently develop all of these other cultural aspects. Yeah. And I am not wrong on that. I am absolutely right. Yeah.
I was really interested in something you said earlier on, just to link it back to sustainability, particularly in farming. You talked about how often, from a technology perspective, we're always looking for new innovations, new. I think you referred to it as the sort of the sexy stuff, you know, the exciting new
Oh,
technologies.
yeah, the
But
shiny.
actually, yeah, but actually, but you also said that actually looking at how we've done things before and maybe building on that
Yeah.
is also important. So how does that link in with sustainability? You know, I'm thinking of this, you know, we're always looking at, are there new ways to produce food, or should we actually be looking at some of the ways we've always produced food and build some of that into our sustainability plans as well?
Yeah. In my presentations, I have this thing called Earth Gain, and there are 9 Earth Gain principles. Yeah. And what they are is a series, it's a doctrine, and there are a series of protocols. And as you work through these, yeah, all of a sudden it tells you what you are really doing. Yeah. I'm not getting you to make the decision. You're doing it by running through these protocols. And this has gained kind of a popular acceptance. So, for example, one of them would be recyclability. Yeah. One of them might be no organic chemicals, no VOX. Yeah. One of them might be the ability to recycle. Farming, it should be ring fenced. It needs to be protected, because farming is evolution. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And farming evolves. So if you look at our natural landscape, that's been shaped by farmers for 2,000 years.
Mm.
You can't, for something that's so important, that sustains us as human beings. Yeah, you've got to be very careful in any changes that you make to food production, and what sustains us to be able to do all those things that we need to do. Yeah. So if you look at some of the things that they're talking about in farming sustainability, yeah, they're talking about crop rotation.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's not new. I learned about that at school. You come to Warwickshire and you can see the shape of the fields where they're undulating. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so that would have been the 3 crop rotation. Yeah. So farmers do not have an interest in destroying effectively their own machinery.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wouldn't go and take a hammer to one of my £250,000 CNC machines, because, so you are not, I work on the base principle that you are not going to destroy the overall environment. Yeah, because it's been shaped for the last 2,000 years. Yeah. And trying to revolutionize farming, yeah, over a short period of time against commercial, academic, and political expediency, for my measure, is a dangerous thing to do. You have to let the farmers evolve over a period of time. Yeah. And you have to provide them with the tools and the resource to be able to ensure that people like me can buy food at a sensible cost and is sustainable. And my
So where
fear is,
does, sorry to interrupt you, Jules, you talk about innovation as well, I think, a lot, don't
yeah,
you? Well, so where does innovation and sustainability come together? Because again, agriculture across all the spectrums, the levels of innovation, particularly in machinery and science, is incredible. But how do you see, as bedfellows, innovation and sustainability coming together?
Right. Well, for example, let's look at machinery.
Yeah,
Yeah.
particularly from an engineering perspective, which
I'll
is your
take it from an
background,
engineering point of
yeah.
view. Engineering increases productivity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So more horsepower. Yeah. More plowed fields
Mm-hmm.
from one person. So we're talking about the productivity of a person, and we're talking about the yields. Now, these are principles that we use in manufacturing. Yeah. I know that people are using drones to inspect. Well, that's fine. Okay. So there's that level of innovation. But for example, I work in the marine industry and I belong to something called the Next Generation. It's leading experts trying to figure out how we electrify vessels. Yeah. Ships. So if we wanted to fully electrify a 100,000-ton ship from internal combustion engine, yeah, or nuclear in some instances, to electric, that vessel would need to become 2 million tons. It's what we call 20x. Yeah. Now let's take that principle. Yeah. And if you took that 2 million ton electric driven ship into Portsmouth Harbour, there isn't enough electricity to charge it. Yeah. But the mantra is that we have to go electrification. Now, what we're not doing is we're not talking about the how. So I've been working with this group for 10 years going, how do we do that? So, let's say, for example, a government edict comes out that all combine harvesters have to be electrified.
Mm-hmm. That's what I was just thinking, actually. Good example.
Yeah. Well, I will tell you something for nothing. It ain't happening. One, because of the duty cycle. Combines, I see them where I live. They're working 24/7.
That's right. Yeah.
That's an asset. You've got to sweat it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Two, the way to be able to achieve the same duty cycle, yeah, you are going to have to make the thing so heavy, it's going to sink into the ground.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And so there's all these basic things, but everybody chases electrification. So, for example, if I wanted to make farming sustainable, I would ring fence the machinery, the technology, and basically say, right, we might want to electrify passenger cars. Agricultural equipment has to be ring fenced.
It's interesting, again, Jules, because I think about some of the equipment we've got in agriculture, and where technology can really help in terms of yields, efficiency, is in accuracy. So GPS systems and things like that absolutely help. But I think I was interested in this. We have to keep innovating. We have to keep innovating, and sometimes innovation could take us backwards in other areas, as you say. Suddenly saying, well, we don't want to have diesel fueled equipment in agriculture because it's got to be electrified, that could make the soil worse because you suddenly got heavy machinery on the soil. So it's how do we get the balance, I suppose, and your background in terms of marine technology, how do you get the balance between innovation, which is almost constant, people wanting to constantly innovate, with this sustainability piece of yes, but there has to be a balance with sustainability. I almost feel like the innovation wants to drive us forward, and sometimes sustainability needs to hold us back. So, how do we get that balance right in your experience, Jules?
I've been developing products since I was at the beginning of my career, and interventions of ideas very rarely work. The market will decide.
Right.
So the farmer will decide. Yeah. And so I develop a product every month, and I have a general rule. Yeah. If I don't like it, it's going to sell really well. If I design something that I like, nobody wants it. Yeah.
And why is that? Where's that come from?
Because the tendency is to over specify it, and the design becomes the obsession rather than the function and the cost of ownership. Yeah.
So that's the balance, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's very tricky. But you can imagine out there, we have green activists, we have politicians listening to the green activists, we have research establishments that get funding on new shiny stuff. Yeah. And generally, if you want a product or a new innovation to succeed, you go and ask people that are listening to this podcast. Yeah. I attended the Rishi Sunak Liz Truss hustings at the NEC, yeah, just to see what was being said. But on the way in, I got accosted by Insulate Britain people, and this young lady, if I'm allowed to say that nowadays, this young person, I should say, thrust a leaflet into my hand and said, you know, we need to insulate Britain. I said, I completely agree with you. And she looked shocked.
You're not supposed to do that, are we? Are we supposed to?
No. And I said, I completely agree with you, but how do we do it?
How do we do it? Yeah, exactly.
And she just looked at me in shock and she said, well, we insulate with foam. I said, right, okay. I said, one of your objectives is to stop oil and gas and fossil fuels. I said, now, if we use foam, it's polyurethane foam. Yeah, the giveaway's in the name, thane. I said, it's made from gas. So how are we going to insulate all these houses? And we suddenly get this great big CO2 spike. Yeah, we're mining more and more material just to insulate over the short period of time to stop the world burning up in 5 years, which was 12 years, which who knows where that's going to go.
Yeah.
And she said, oh, well, there's other forms. I said, right, okay. We could use rock wool. I said, do you have any idea how rock wool is made? I said, no. I said, well, it's made of coal and slag and yeah. I said, basically it's molten stone and you have to heat it to 3,500 degrees C and blow cold air across it to make the fibers. Yeah. I said, that was actually discovered by a volcanologist who could see, who was in the lava field and saw all this. And I said, so how much energy does it require? And where are you going to get the resource to do it? Because you need this slag and, you know. And I said, that's not very sustainable, is it? I said, and if we try and insulate all the houses, we're going to get this massive spike, make things worse. Oh, okay. Well, they can use blocks. I said, right, okay. I said, you're talking about the cinder blocks. I said, do you know how those are made? She said, well, no. And I said, well, basically it's cement, which is not good. Yeah. And then it's packed out with something called fly ash. Do you know where fly ash comes from? I said, no. I said, it comes from coal-fired power stations. I said, so we've gone through the 3 main areas of insulation types. What else do you suggest? Oh, well, we could use wool. I said, yeah, I guess you could. I said, if you
how much wool would you need? Yeah, that's a lot of sheep.
I said, have you calculated how many sheep we would need? And it's like, oh, and I said, and what about sheep farts destroying the, and how much land is it going to take? And what happens when you stuff it in the cavity walls and some enterprising insect or microorganism decides that it's going to eat the wool?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I said, look, I totally agree with you. Yeah. But it's when we ask the how.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
And everything has a cause and effect. Yeah. So
I think I've had a conversation with you about this before, Jules, where the world is pushing for an instant solution and there's no
instant solution.
No period of development and
no
solid research being done.
And in your view, is that because of the, and this is a leading question, I've just realized I'm about to ask you, but yeah, I sense some of that David's just said is political. There's a political drive to appear to be, even the COP summits, you know, to be the politicians to be seen to be doing something. So a soundbite like we won't have any petrol cars by whatever the date was, we're all going to have electric cars, knowing that and even I know that how are the batteries going to be made? What happens to the batteries when the cars are finished? It's almost as if some of that doesn't get discussed. So the
None of
true,
it gets discussed. None
yes,
of it. Yeah.
true element, and particularly with our farmers, they get hammered if they're dairy farmers. Beef and dairy farming is the absolute scourge of the world. It's producing all this carbon, and it just all seems so soundbitey to me.
It is.
Anyway, I'm just
It is.
interested in your view on
It is.
where is
Yeah.
it coming from? Is it political? Is it social? Where is this
It's
drive for
it's a
sustainability?
number of things. It is. If you read my COP26 paper that I did with Birmingham City University and Beverly Nielsen, yeah, I talk about political, academic, and commercial expediency. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have academics researching into a very narrow field and trying to tie it to government funding. Yeah. So there is a political agenda. And then you have corporates that are trying to jump on making and manufacturing the new shiny things. Yeah. And I see this all the time. And what I'll give you an example. I'm just going to use my wife's pad here. I'm going to try and draw something. I don't know if you can see this.
Yes, we can. Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Right. Every product or follows what we call a product life cycle curve. Yeah. And it basically goes over time and down.
Yeah, and down. Yeah.
Yeah. And what will happen, as you can see here, that's the product life cycle curve. Now, the second product life cycle curve comes in. Yeah. And you get an intersection where the old product drops away.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the new one takes over. And you can see that in phones, computers. Yeah. Taking a photograph used to be film.
Yeah.
And then it was a digital camera. And
Yeah.
now it's on your phone.
Yeah.
Yeah. Music, vinyl.
Oh, come on, 8-track.
Yeah. Vinyl. Vinyl, 8-track, Dave. Yeah.
Compact discs.
Set,
Yeah.
developed by Philips.
Mm-hmm.
Laserdisc, 12-inch, developed by Philips. Yeah. CD, yeah, developed by Philips. MP4, I don't know if Philips developed that one. And now you have the evolution to just download onto anything. So they've all followed product life cycle curves. Yeah. With that one, none of them threaten the existence of our humanity because we can't eat. Yeah. So it's okay to push for that. Farming, I would say, is a very different thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So basically, if you can see that, yeah, this is time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and this is the market size. Okay. And then we have a third product life cycle curve.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you have your intersection point. Yeah. Now, what we are doing, for one reason or another.
Just pause there a second, Jules. For those that might be just listening on audio and not
Yeah.
seeing the picture that Jules has drawn, effectively it's a graph with what looks like a mountain, like a soft hill.
Mountain. Yeah.
Yeah, and
then
the mountains
mountain
intersect. So
that
you imagine a
crosses over.
mountain range of mountains that intersect. That's the picture that Jules is drawing, looking across the horizon. And there's certain intersection points when the one mountain curve is dropping down and the next one is coming up. Just to help those that are listening in.
Yeah. So, right, I'm going to show you this now. Okay. That is the first product life cycle curve. Let's call that internal combustion engine.
Yep.
There should be a product life cycle curve here in the second mountain. Yeah. And there's not. There's a big gap.
There's a gap.
That should be hybrid.
Right. Between the two.
Yeah. But we've jumped to internal combustion engines.
Interesting.
Yeah. That in product development, that valley is what we call the valley of death. We've jumped to product life cycle curve.
So taking things
what you do
like
is you destabilize both markets. You destabilize the internal combustion, the improvement there, and you also destabilize the electric car market, which should be following a lot later. And the problem is that we have technologists, and I'm a technologist, saying the technology and the science will catch up. Well, I've got news for you. It ain't going to.
Yeah, not that quickly. No.
Not that quickly. It will over time, but it isn't. So we have to decide between the time that technology cuts in and becomes totally usable and meets all the duty cycles, and figure out if it is threatening our sustainability in food production up until that point.
I think this is brilliant, Jules, because when I think of the farmers again who are coming under so much pressure from what they put into the soil, or what they put onto the soil, whether that's livestock or it's crops, and there's this constant feeling of they've got to change really quickly, as opposed to that journey of, I think the hybrid engine being a really good metaphor. That, I had a previous hybrid car, I really liked it because it would self-charge. It didn't require the same sort of battery size that a total electrification car does. It was sort of that in between, and yet there's this drive, we must push on towards total electrification. So I think in farming, the sustainability message is, without sounding too simplistic about it, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Don't say we've got to stop doing all the things that we're doing. It's not like suddenly saying we can't have any cattle anywhere because they don't understand what the cattle bring to the soil. So how do we get to that place where we address that valley of death almost, and we get in, particularly in agriculture, in your view, where we can do this, what is it, a gentle move across, or a because that to me then is sustainability, isn't it?
What's the bridge?
Yeah, that's a good question. How do we bridge it? How do we bridge that gap?
The market will decide.
Yeah, it's market driven.
It's market driven. Yeah. I was at Michael Gove's environmental bill reading in 2015, and I was surrounded by lots of well-meaning people.
I know where you're going with this. Go on.
And all obviously chasing, a lot of think tanks there, a lot of them chasing research funding. Okay. And I said to them, I'm investing in horses, because if we carry on this way, that's where we're going to be. And everybody had a laugh. I said, no. I've just come from Marylebone down to the QE Centre, just outside Westminster, and it's about 1.5 mile journey. I said, I averaged 7 miles an hour on that journey in an electrified or semi-electric Coventry-built taxi. I said, that is the same operational profile as a 19th century horse-drawn hackney carriage. I said, and that's why these taxis are called hackney carriages. Yeah. I said, now what you have to figure is, at what point does it become economically driven that using horses is cheaper? At what point? Yeah. And everybody had a laugh. Oh yeah, but the technology will catch up. I said, it might not. And then basically somebody said to me, yes, but automation and technology will win. I said, no, it won't. Not every time.
Not every single time, yeah. Now I could almost envisage, going back to your combine harvester example of, let's electrify these huge machines, the aha moment of realizing, actually, do you know what, we'd be better off with a couple of horses and a plough back in the fields. Almost, and is that what happens? Do we sort of often go full circle?
Everything goes round in circles.
Yeah.
Well, there is a large movement now of farmers who are not ploughing fields. They're just drilling different crops over each other to prevent weedage, and they've grown massively. So, and to use your music analogy earlier, Jules, we're going back to vinyl again now. And
my girls love vinyl. So there's something about it, isn't there? The record sleeve and the process of putting the needle on and cleaning the vinyl. And my girls are 13 and 9, and they've discovered this, and it's just, they love it. So but when the technology, you get this, yes, but the technology is going to win. I said, well, 10 years ago, you could go to any petrol station, most certainly in the Midlands, and you'd be able to go through an automatic car wash. Yeah, I said I go to those same petrol stations today, and they don't exist. They've written them out. Now it's got the automation. You can use it 24/7 potentially. Yeah, it does a reasonable job. Yeah. But then all of a sudden you get Eastern Europeans coming in doing hand car washes, a little bit more expensive, end product is much better. And what they do is they destabilize the automated car wash market, at which point it can't sustain itself or pay for itself. Yeah, you do not get
That's
the
really
payback on the
interesting.
asset. So
Really
it does
interesting.
happen.
Yeah. So from a market, the market will drive it. I think that should hopefully give some reassurance to our farmers listening, that who maybe worry that whether it's milk and that's going to be overtaken by people drinking oat milk or soya milk, and then actually like when they actually understand what it takes to make a pint of soya milk and the carbon footprint of that versus a pint
Unbelievable.
of dairy milk
Yeah.
is ridiculously different. And maybe eventually the public will catch up, and then that's what happens, like your car wash analogy. Interestingly, I took my car through a car wash because I was desperate because it was filthy. There was big chunks that were missed, and it was about half the price of going to my Polish friends and other nationalities who will wash my car, double the price. I'll go back to the people who are washing my car properly. I know they're using clean cloths. I know it's not going to get scratched. So it is almost as if innovation and sustainability are these interesting bedfellows that actually almost circulate.
Yeah, I'm just going to have to plug in my computer. Bear with me.
That's okay.
Yeah, well, innovation doesn't always equate to an improved impact or ROI, does it?
No.
So just because Jules invents a new seat doesn't necessarily mean it will be. Well, in Jules's case, it probably will be a better one than the one he did before. But the innovation doesn't always equate to a bigger impact.
I think also it can have knock-on effects. I know, again, some of my clients, our dairy farming clients, who are struggling to find people to come and work on their farms, often will say, well, the answer is robotics. Let's put robots in. And they are actually the technology in robotics in dairy farming is incredible. But it doesn't mean that you don't need people. You still need people to look after the animals. So sometimes we can get almost fixated that innovation is going to be the solution to our sustainability, but it isn't the only solution, is it?
No, it's not. Going back to your case, in my business, yeah, there's automation, yeah, and then there's something called automation. Now, automation takes away jobs.
Yeah.
Automation, which is a Japanese invention and is a philosophy, is you use the technology in the robot to aid the person. You do not look at displacing the person. You use it to increase productivity.
Is that Kaizen?
Yeah, it's more out of the same.
Yeah.
Not more out of less or the same out of less.
Yeah.
And this is where we are making a lot of mistakes. The other thing is that you have to look at the value proposition and how we value what people do. Yeah. So you only value a roofer when your roof leaks. Yeah. We will only value farmers when we don't have food.
Food, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So, it drives my wife and my children round the twist. I go and look at the origin of all the foods, the fresh foods in the supermarket. Yeah. So spring onions from Egypt. What about the carbon footprint and bringing them over?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure they don't go by slow truck. I bet they're avocados.
Yeah.
Really? And so what society has to do, this isn't all down to the farmers. This is down to society. And society, one, has to basically ensure, and it's easier said than done, that food is at a sensible cost, a sustainable cost. Yeah. That we eat within season. That we try and domestically grow as much of our food as possible, yeah, which reduces carbon miles.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And the other thing is, and I'm not saying this because you're farmers, we have to value the farmers. We have to go back to understanding that unless you have a person that puts that seed in the ground, the rest of it can
absolutely
disappear. And for us to be sustainable, I think in farming, we have to revalue the value of farming. Yeah.
100%.
We have to have people, we have to revalue the farmers. Yeah. I'm the same in manufacturing. Manufacturing has been a complete car crash for the last 40 years, and we've managed to survive by being agile.
Yeah.
Farming's the same. Now, I can't understand why all of my peppers and tomatoes and such like comes from Holland. It's because they have hot houses. So, and then you have a self-contained environmental position, and you pump CO2 into the hot houses because you get better productivity in terms of the growth rate of the plants. Yeah. Why are we, if we are so hung up on reducing CO2 and other gases, why are we not investing and putting money into our farmers and our agriculture and such like to be able to put these things in place? Yeah.
I think you probably can't hear it right now, Jules, but there's about maybe 500 if they're listening, people cheering right now at what you're saying, because our farmers right now are feeling in many ways pretty downtrodden, as if they're the cause of the carbon issues we've got in the atmosphere. And what I loved about what you've said so far, and I think Dave's going to ask you about some specific things in a second, but what I loved about what you've said is the how. Is that it's so easy for any particular body, political, social, research body, to come at it from a very narrow angle. And you just said, I think, something really powerful. Let's all just step back a second, slow down, and ask the question, so how's that actually going to work? Not from my own self-interest, whether it's political, social, research, or whatever, but actually, how is this actually going to work? If we all just sat down and did that, we'd come out with much better long-term, truly sustainable solutions rather than a short-term social, political, economic fix.
Yeah, the problem we have is that there are engineers' solutions and farmers' solutions.
Yes.
The people know how to do it.
Yeah.
But we have a very large body of people that are that have a very particular band of interest. Now, the thing is as a farmer, as an engineer, I have to have the full spectrum. Yeah. So, for example, let's look at electrifying vehicles. Now, I'm not against electric vehicles. I worked on the first Tesla. The first Tesla was actually made by Lotus in Norfolk. I did all the lightweighting on it. Yeah. Wow. So I saw that, 25 years ago. It was the first Lotus S2 that came out. That was the first Tesla. And it's all about duty cycle. Yeah. And the capability of the what the piece of machinery can do. Yeah. So if I lived in a city and I just did 6 miles a day, an electric car would be ideal.
Hang on, yeah, absolutely.
But I don't. Yeah. For example, I'm working on an electric ferry and it goes across a river and back again. Fine. But you can't use that same electric ferry to go and do a longer journey. Yeah, because in marine we have very strict rules and we have to have basically contingency built in and obsolescence. Yeah. So it's how you fit the technology to the purpose for which it's intended. So I'm not writing off all the technology. Some of it's very, very good. But for example, that ferry, if it was an internal combustion engine or a hybrid, its operating capability and scope is much larger. Yeah. So for an engineer, I have to look at what I think this might be doing in the future. If it's a very narrow band, fine. Yeah. Of operation, that's absolutely fine. But you can't take that product or that asset and use it somewhere else. So as an engineer that's trying to design around an economic proposition, I have to ensure that its operating capability and its mission capability has a much wider band.
And that as a metaphor is exactly how we should be looking at
A
innovation and
combine,
sustainability.
any piece of equipment that you put on
Mm.
your farm, you are going to need payback, you are going to need productivity, you are going to need low downtime.
Mm.
Yeah. And
Exactly.
at this moment in time, it's what I call the TRL, technology readiness level.
Mm.
Could we electrify a combine harvester? Let's just use a car, for example, because most people can get their head around that. Is the car technology ready? Yes, under certain circumstances. So an electric car, if you're driving 10, 12 miles or short journeys, ideal. Is the charging capability technology ready?
Yeah, exactly. Nope.
No.
Nowhere near.
Is the grid ready?
Nope.
No. Is the ability to extract mineral resource
Yeah,
ready?
exactly.
No. Is the
Is there the mineral resource?
no,
Exist,
it takes 16 years to get a mine up.
Yeah.
And they've shut most of them down. If you look at one of the big mining companies has just shut down a copper mine.
Mm.
So you've got to go right through the supply chain, yeah, and you've got to have all the technology readiness levels in synchronization.
Yeah, that's the case.
And we don't have that. One, because a lot of this resource is global. Two, because there might be a war. And we've seen what's happened during COVID. Now, ironically, I have spent the last 30 years ensuring that 95% of all my product is made within a 10-mile radius of Birmingham and our factory in Glasgow. Yeah, so same 10-mile radius, 10-mile radius. Yeah, very little is bought in. And I was effectively laughed at. I could have made a lot more money by bringing in cheap. Yeah. And then something called COVID happened and the supply chains
Collapsed, yeah.
collapsed.
Mm.
Now, being in the marine industry, marine is primarily a global industry. Yeah. Over COVID, we doubled our turnover because we were still open and we could still produce.
So pause there. I think Dave's going to ask you a couple of questions before we close, but almost again metaphoring that into farming. And I know it's mostly farmers who are listening, but the concept of buy local, get your stuff from the local area.
Buy
If you
local,
want to
buy
reduce
seasonal.
your carbon footprint,
Yeah.
just buy from people who are local to you rather than the supermarkets that are transporting strawberries. When I was a kid, we didn't have strawberries in the winter. We had them in the summer. That's when you had strawberries.
Yeah.
Because you bought it from the local grocers. Now we want strawberries all year round, apparently. So buy local would be one of the things we can all be more sustainable. And Dave, what did you want to ask Jules just before we close?
So we could speak to him for a week.
Yes, yeah.
And I'm sure the farmers would want it as well. But Jules, there's one thing I want to draw you back to a conversation we had a month or two ago. Because part of the sustainability push from the government into the farming industry is around being carbon neutral and more efficient and sustainable. And it was making me think, as you were telling me about one of the clients that you were sent into to discuss their carbon neutral building. So I'm trying to think very pragmatically and very succinctly. If you can think from a farmer's perspective, I want to build a new barn, warehouse unit, farmhouse, piece of infrastructure, do something on the farm. They might think or assume wrongly that I'm doing this, I'm being sustainable, it's going to be help me with my carbon emissions and blah, blah, blah. Give people a way of thinking, because you pointed out to me it was eye-opening for me about how people assume that's brilliant, it's recycled, therefore carbon neutral, and you just went, well, have you considered this? Can you remember the conversation?
Yeah.
Okay.
One of the things I do is I help the King's Awards with applicants, and sustainability is some of the things that I've done, and so I get to see a lot of different applicants for the King's Award. It's actually a very, very good process to go through, because it actually makes you stop and think about your own business. But I visited two applicants or potential applicants. One of them is a 150-year-old casting company, cast iron, yeah, and you know, sand on the floor, based in Wolverhampton, amazing place. They did the Iron Bridge works, and I was walking through to see how, you know, we could frame their application to the King's Award. And a foundry is a hard sell. It's a really hard sell for sustainability. Until we went out the back and there were these stillages full of second-hand brake discs and brake drums, which were made out of cast iron. And I just looked at it and I just said, "What's this?" He said, "Oh, all of our cast iron is recycled." I said, "Okay. How many tons do you do a year?" And he told me. I fell off my chair. So on my my computer-aided design system, I have something called Sustainability Express. So I pulled up an average brake disc and worked out, if it was recycled, yeah, how much CO2 it would save, water eutrophication, air acidification, and basically energy, yeah. And by the time I'd finished the calculations, they are saving 8 million kilograms of CO2 a year. Wow. Purely by recycling brake discs. Because you also don't have the cost of the refining, you don't have the water requirement, you don't have the energy requirement, and to recycle a material is infinitely more efficient than creating it from prime. Now, the problem we have in all of this is we tend to go for new minerals, yeah, which are vastly expensive to the environment, yeah, in terms of water eutrophication, air acidification. If you recycle the material, it's much more efficient. Let me give you an example. I primarily use aluminium in most of my products throughout the factories, yeah, in all of my designs. Now, aluminium is expensive to make. Unless you get aluminium that is made by hydroelectric power, and all of a sudden it starts becoming a little bit more environmentally friendly. But about 80% of all aluminium that's ever been extracted by man is still in existence.
Wow. And
then to convert aluminium, yeah, recycled existing aluminium to new aluminium only requires 5% of the original energy cost.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, the story I was telling Dave was that I saw one company that did a lot of things in wood, and, oh, this is sustainable because it's wood. And I said, well, yeah, I'm not so sure that it is. Yeah. So if you took a wooden beam and an aluminium beam, for example, the wood over its extended life has potentially a similar CO2 footprint to the aluminium. Yeah. So I was trying to explain this and said, right, okay, where does the wood come from? Where it's Canada. I said, do you know how they get a lot of this wood out? And like, no. I said, there is a trend to pull it out by helicopter, because what they do is they don't just flatten a complete area, they pick certain trees. I said, and then to get the wood seasoned, what do you think they do with it? And I said, oh, I don't know. I said, they put it in a big oven to dry it.
Heat and chemicals, yeah.
Yeah. I said, and then it's got to be sawn, and then it's got to be transported. And then what happens at the end of life of this wood? You recycle it, or yeah. I said, well, you can return it to the earth, at which point wood is a carbon trap. It traps carbon. Okay. I said, so it returns to the earth, degrade, releases the carbon. Or you burn it, releases the carbon. Yeah. I said aluminium, once it's been made once, it requires less and less and less and less and less. Yeah. So if since the first Napoleon III had a dining set, yeah, made of aluminium, when the rest of his guests ate off solid gold. Yeah. That goes to show that the value of aluminium back then, how far it goes back. Yeah. But aluminium was valued at a higher level than gold.
Wow. So if we had to sort of summarize then your thoughts on, again, particularly bringing it to the agricultural sector, this balance between innovation and sustainability, what would be the things that you think the industry really needs to look at? 2 or 3 things that as a whole, not necessarily just the individual farmer, but collectively, what do we need to do you think, to get the balance right between innovation and sustainability?
It's actually very difficult, and the only way you're going to do it is by talking to the people that do it and know how to do it.
Yeah.
Farmers have been shaping our environment for 2,000 years.
Mm.
Yeah, they're not about to go breaking it up. Here's another one for you. We want to get rid of cattle.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's the push
ruminant.
for, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if you know, but Virgin Atlantic have just flown a plane over to America with a sustainable fuel. Yep. Hate to tell you, but a lot of that sustainable fuel is made up from farm waste and abattoir waste.
Mm-hmm.
So where are you going to get the critical mass from?
Yeah, if you don't have the farming. Yeah.
And we don't stop and think about the we don't stop and think about the byproducts. Everybody thinks that coal and petrol is just used for burning. It's not. Yeah. So you look at the byproducts that come from you know, abattoirs and cattle. You have the leather, you have the animal fats, and we use animal fats still in manufacturing processes because they are incredibly efficient.
Yeah.
We use vegetable oils in manufacturing. It's not all synthetic. You get bone meal, you get sinew and such like that, will be used for a whole range of things, and we neglect all of the byproducts. Give you an example. One of the things that we use to filter water and air and a number of other things is something called activated carbon. Yeah. So a spoonful of activated carbon will have the same surface area as Wembley football pitch. That's how it filters. I use activated carbon for taking out nasty things in bilge water with my pumps. Yeah. Activated carbon can be derived from charcoal, but the best stuff comes from coal. Yeah. So if we get rid of the coal industry, what currently happens to the production of activated carbon? 1, it disappears. 2, it goes up in price so much that nobody can afford it. Now, you will say, well, technology will catch up. Well, it hasn't, and I can't find an alternative at the moment. And trust me, I look. But the other thing is that what else is activated carbon used in? It's used in kidney dialysis machines.
So I think the overriding message.
So you don't get something for nothing. You don't get
exactly
something for nothing.
The overriding message that I've taken away from our farming community is that don't panic. The sustainability piece, where we may be coming under attack in a very narrow area, once people like yourself and others who ask those questions, yeah, but how? If you take that away, what are you going to replace it with? How will that work? I find that really encouraging as a discussion that makes me think that it's not going to be so narrow that either the political, the social, the economic argument is the only one that comes out. If we start to look more broadly, actually there will be solutions that will probably take longer. Technology might eventually help us, but it's not a simple solution of take cows out, take this out, take that out, and suddenly it all goes away. It doesn't, does it? Do you agree, Dave? That's sort of the...
I think that, and the final thing there Jules said, which is around if you're going to do any kind of infrastructure or renovation, consider the materials you're using. Actually do some research into where it's come from, what is its impact on the environment, and if you're in any doubt, get in touch with Jules Morgan.
Yes,
Is
exactly.
what I'm hearing here.
I think
Jules,
if
you've
I
been-
was if I was looking at if I was a politician of some kind of stature, I would be looking at one, reducing the carbon miles on food, making it more
yeah,
domestic. So I would be sitting there basically saying, right, okay, we need to invest in this sector to allow people to become productive, to reduce carbon miles, to create food security. Yeah, that's what I would be doing. Here is a grant to build a hothouse.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would then be ring fencing the current method of production until solutions and technology has proven itself. So, for example, you could drive for electrification. Well, ain't happening anytime soon. Me and my group, which includes some pretty heavy hitters, have been trying now for a long time to figure out how we electrify marine, and hybrid is where we've stopped. Yeah. But the big one is we need to change the opinion of society.
It's the narrative, isn't it? Yeah.
You've got to change narrative. One, you can't have what you want when you want it. That's not, yeah. So don't tell me about being environmentally friendly and being a climate denier or whatever. Yeah. If you're eating avocado on toast every morning. Yeah. We have to invest in the ability for farmers to produce food at a sensible cost.
Sensible cost, yeah.
At a sensible cost, not yeah. And you've got to look at this holistically. So I compete with the Chinese and the rest of the world in manufacturing. Yeah.
Yep.
And I managed to do it because we're agile, we're clever, and we work at it. And this should be the same for farming. So you're telling me that we can ship apples from New Zealand all halfway around the globe, or virtually nearly all the way around the globe, and still undercut domestic production. Well, I don't believe that. I'm sorry, I don't believe it. And
Jules, we're gonna have to interrupt you, mate. I'm really sorry, but we've literally run out. We've run over time.
Yeah,
and we could talk to you for a whole week.
It's fantastic.
But if we do another series, we'd love you to come back.
Yes, yeah. There's so much value in what you've said, Jules, in terms of, and I think the farmers will relate so much to what you're saying, and will feel not necessarily vindicated, but certainly supported in this idea that it's not a simple solution. Food production and food sustainability is not a simple, let's just remove this, remove that, or instigate this. It's a more complex situation. So thank you very much indeed for your perspective.
Indeed.
I think the parting word is that you only value something when you no longer have it.
Yes, exactly.
And we've seen that in manufacturing. Well, why don't we make our own PPE? Well, maybe you should have thought about that 30 years ago.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And it's that comes back to that commercial expediency.
And it starts with us. So, brilliant. Jules, thank you. God bless you. Thank you for your time. Real insight.
I hope some of the things that I've said make common sense, but they've got to be addressed. It's always the simple things that make the big impact. It always is.
More than you think, the common sense.
So we'll see you all again on another episode of Just for Farmers. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.